try not to.
I have a question for you.
I'm not sure what. I'm not sure what she's.
Like, for example,
Let's just say this is representative territory. I'm not familiar with that. Usually, like a judge needs, let's say, hold somebody in contempt. The methods would be to have marshals or something like that imprison the person until they go off, right? And so this is an unusual circumstance, but we're in an unusual. So I'm not familiar with that specific procedure. I wouldn't doubt that there might be something like that, but this is, when the Governor Wallace in the 60s, tried to keep people out of Alabama, or this is part of Eisenhower called it the National Guard. Figured that was the president, and they used force to enforce the court order back. In this case, it's the president. That's we don't have that. So I don't know. And nor does this come forward. I have no idea. That's me neither. I have no idea. I hope it never comes to that.
Devin, this is David.
Hey. No, I think so.
So I thought the order would be you first, Devin, so you could kind of give us the lay of the land in terms of D.O.G.E. Activities, effects in Hawaii.
Okay.
And then Manfred can give us a kind of like why is this happening? Some kind of political analysis, and then David, I thought you could then round it up with like, we do have tools. The state of Hawaii is doing things,
Of course.
et cetera, et cetera.
Of course I'm happy.
Yeah.
Whatever order you think is fine.
You're looking very casual today as compared to last time.
I hope that's okay.
Wonderful. Oh my God. So is this the constitutional crisis? Are we here?
Well, I mean, this had been kind of like the area where initially it seemed like something like this was coming, because in this particular, the cases involving the Venezuelan detention, there was some flopping of the orders, and then this one has an additional wrinkle. It involves somebody who's not within the territorial jurisdiction of the United States.
And has that ever happened before that you're aware of?
With what exactly?
Like someone that they've deported that the court orders back?
I'm not sure. I mean, I'm sure that there are probably instances, I'm going to guess during maybe the pre-Civil War era involving fugitive slaves and things like that, or maybe things like that. So that's like pre-Civil War.
Migrants. Let me get how you would like me to introduce you, other than, I know your title. So Manfred, I was just saying
And including multiple cases involving D.O.G.E and D.O.G.E-related matters, D.O.G.E.
I've stopped saying Doge, so thank you for that.
Douche. That's when someone said to me.
So Manfred, other than your title, how can I introduce you? How many books? 532.
No. No, I mean, it depends on how you count, but it's like over 30 at this point. But, you can mention whatever you like. It's just keep it short. Just professor, chair of sociology, and maybe you say a word about globalization. That's one of my major research areas, and especially as it relates to ideologies, because then it says,
Right. Thank you.
thank you.
Devin,
Yeah.
other than your title, how can I introduce you?
Shoots. I think, yeah, just like senior policy analyst is fine.
Senior policy analyst on taxation.
On taxes and budget, yeah.
You spoke last time too, right? Yeah, you did a great job. I admired your eloquence.
Nothing else?
Your
No
ability to sort of.
Not really.
embellishments?
No, that's totally fine.
Okay.
Thank you, though.
Okay, thank you.
Immigration
So,
was
like,
just a small part of what we do.
Yeah,
More of
I'll
what we
keep it to
do
15.
involves D.O.G.E and D.O.G.E-related stuff. So. Very interested in hearing this. I'd be interested to hear how it meets because I have my own, living through the litigation
Right.
and seeing it. I have my own kind of theories. I'm interested to see if it matches yours.
Well, you tell me afterwards.
Yeah, I think so.
Huh.
Yeah, Hawaii Appleseed.
Oh, great. And you're doing what mostly?
For me, it's mostly tax and budget policy
Oh,
work.
okay,
Yeah,
great.
advocacy.
Yeah.
But we do all kinds of areas of
Isn't there a
expertise.
bill pending right now about sort of where the legislature is telling UH they may get more positions in tax policy area or something like that?
There was, I think there was something about that because we
Yeah.
talked to the House Finance Chair and he said they want UH to do a study about. So that's apparently going to take a while though.
Right. As we all know, right?
Yeah, because the House Finance Chair has like this. He really wants a state property tax, so he kind of like I think he's hoping that the study is going to support his assertion. Well, yeah, because like technically the state can levy a property tax right now, so he wants to change that. There's a lot of like power dynamics at play, but basically he wants. I think they want to have more money coming in to them instead of the counties.
How much would that be?
I don't know because I don't even know what he would want the rate to be. He just talks about it every year. That's one of his big things. Yeah.
It's a heavy lift.
It is. That's what we said to him too. We're like, oh well, I mean, good luck.
Exactly. Very quickly you're going to make yourself a real unliked person.
Yeah, which is why he prefers, I think, to pass like the baton to other people like us. If just like you put yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. Mike's up a little blind.
Hi, everyone. Should we get started? Can you hear me in the back? Can you hear me in the back? Can- Louder.
You might have to get it close.
Okay. Good.
An inch to your mic.
Most of your mics move. So.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, now can you hear me in the back? Okay, wonderful. Aloha. Welcome to the second of Hawaii J20 Solidarity Series. Tonight we're talking about standing united with those who have been hurt by the so-called Department of Government Efficiency. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Hawaii J20, we are a nonpartisan group of unpaid folks very intent on defending people and the planet from a second Trump administration. Or I'm wondering if I should still call it an administration, or are we into full-blown regime land by now? I'm not exactly sure. We first came together on January the 20th, 2017, to act on shared concerns about the rhetoric, the actions, and the politics of Trump's agenda. And we revived ourselves January 20th, 2025, to fight Trump and the billionaires again, and clearly it's now more urgent than ever. We very much welcome anyone who wishes to join us in collective action. And if you haven't already, please put your name and contact information on one of the sign-in sheets so we can stay in touch with you and let you know what's happening. The next installment of our Solidarity series takes place on May the 9th from 6 to 8 p.m. and it will be standing united for our rights and freedoms. We will have speakers addressing Trump's attacks on our civil rights, on our constitutional rights, our freedom of speech, and our protection from arbitrary government actions. So you can find out information about that third installment of our Solidarity series on our website, hawaiij20.com. So tonight we're here to talk about the activities of, again, the so-called Department of Government Efficiency, because every bit of that D.O.G.E name is completely false. It's not a government department. It has absolutely nothing to do with efficiency, unless they're talking about efficiently hurting people through the wholesale torching of government agencies. We have a terrific lineup of speakers who will help us better understand how the activities of D.O.G.E are affecting us here in Hawaii, provide us with an analysis of why the Trump regime is so intent on hurting us and everyone else, and what the state of Hawaii is doing to fight back. The so-called Department of Government Efficiency was set up to find, quote, fraud, waste, and make the government efficient. Instead, a small band of D.O.G.E operatives have been dispersed to almost every federal agency and have access to every federal data set, including our personal and financial information. They have exaggerated wildly and willfully spread lies about the exceedingly small level of fraud and abuse of government services. They have mocked and taunted those whose ability to keep living in their homes and put food on their tables, to keep doing the important work that they do to fight cancer and intimate partner violence, give us warnings about catastrophic weather events. They have mocked people whose very lives are in jeopardy because they've lost a paying job or missed a Social Security check. All this talk about rampant fraud in federal agencies, and especially in federal social services like Social Security, is familiar. I'm certainly old enough to understand and recognize this long-standing rhetoric, because it's been used to sow distrust of both the federal government and those whose lives depend on federal services. Talk about fraud is always rampant when administrations are intent on gutting social services that we and those before us fought long and hard for. Long and hard to protect us from unemployment, from short-term sickness, from long-term disability, from the simple and joyous fact of old age. These protections not only keep us alive, they keep us strong and ready to fight. The social services that we rely upon were not handed to us by some benevolent government. They were fought for by unions who understood that without them, workers would be pressured to accept any sort of job and poverty wages just to survive. Social benefits give us an option to shitty jobs. They were also fought for by social reformers distraught at the high levels of poverty of children, of seniors, and wanted to ensure that people were taken care of. They were fought for by women who know that raising a child and taking care of a parent is work, real hard work. The Trump regime has taken these hard-won protections and relabeled them handouts to the supposedly undeserving. Trump's rhetoric doesn't come out of nowhere. Think back to Ronald Reagan's infamous and completely fabricated welfare queen. Reagan mobilized the long-standing racist stereotypes about black women to justify the gutting of welfare, a crucial last resort for people. Miserly from the start, a welfare payment was nonetheless the difference between having shelter and being houseless, between eating or starving, between staying in an abusive relationship or leaving the abuser. Reagan's lies about welfare queens bankrupting the federal government took hold in people's imaginations. We weren't effective in countering that rhetoric. After Reagan, Bill Clinton swept in, promising to, quote, end welfare as we know it, and he did exactly that. In the process, not only were people receiving social services demonized,
They were abandoned to the whims of capitalist markets. Trump and Musk's D.O.G.E. is here to finish off the job. They lie about hard-working government employees being lazy and self-serving. Trump's Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick, dares to tell us that only a fraudster would complain about having their Social Security cut off. Let us be very clear on what they are doing. By gutting federal agencies, they are gutting our protection from capitalist markets, labor markets, housing markets, food markets. Gutting federal agencies is a double whammy. It is a loss of employment for those who work for the government, and it's a loss of services, a loss of benefits, a loss of protections for everyone else. People without social safety nets face falling wages, lower safety standards, poor quality food and water. So let us not confuse the gutting of federal agencies cut by D.O.G.E. with small and more efficient government, another old chestnut of Reagan's. Trump is not after less government. He wants to strengthen that part of the government that can jail us, deport us, kill us. The military budget and the budget for ICE agents to tear people away from us is growing. Trump wants a government to police us and squash our civil liberties. The parts of the government that he wants to shrink is the part that keeps us alive and well. Lastly, I would be remiss to leave out how Trump is getting away with this so far. D.O.G.E. rhetoric is especially focused on anti-immigrant politics. Musk and the Trump regime have pitched cuts to a program previously thought of as untouchable in US politics, the Social Security Administration. They're telling us that it's necessary now because Musk says that undocumented immigrants are fraudulently accessing hundreds of billions of dollars worth of entitlements, including Social Security, Medicaid, and disability programs, as part of a Democratic scheme for votes. Musk, I'm quoting Musk here, quote, "By using entitlements fraud, the Democrats have been able to attract and retain vast numbers of illegal immigrants." That is a lie. We ignore anti-immigrant politics at our own peril, literally at our own peril. Remember how Reagan's welfare queen led to Clinton's gutting of welfare? Well, the same year that Clinton slashed meager welfare payments to the poorest members of our society, 1996, he also enacted draconian anti-immigration legislation in the name of, you guessed it, protecting Americans. We must always keep connected in our analysis and our actions the two forums that Hawaii J20 has organized in the past month. The first on standing united with migrants, and the second on solidarity with those hurt by D.O.G.E. United we stand, divided we fall. And we're here today to say we are standing strong with one another, and it is Trump and his entire fascist regime that will fall. So thank you very much. And now for what you've been waiting for, our three fantastic speakers. I'll introduce them in the order that they will be speaking tonight. Our first speaker is Devin Thomas from Hawaii Appleseed. He is their senior policy analyst on taxes and budget. He will be followed by Manfred Steger, who is the professor and chair of the Department of Sociology at UH Manoa. The author of numerous books with a focus on globalization, especially as it relates to ideology, which he will be talking about tonight. And lastly, but not least, we have David Day, who is a special assistant to the Attorney General of Hawaii. He is the lead counsel in 11 cases against the Trump administration, including multiple cases involving the D.O.G.E. So help me give a round of applause for our fantastic speakers. And Devin, take it away.
Okay. Thank you very much. You know, D.O.G.E, 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 whatever you want to call it, it's received a considerable amount of criticism. That's putting it lightly, right? It represents a pretty corrosive idea that government and all the programs and services that it provides are a waste and should be pared back to make room for more private investment, right? For lifting up those struggling corporations. And I want to reiterate the point that this is not a new idea, right? This dates back decades, actually, to the 1940s and 50s, even further back. And it's part of a larger undercurrent, right? It's an undercurrent that we see at the county, state, and federal levels, not exclusive to Elon Musk, to D.O.G.E, although they are a pretty big component of what's happening at the moment. I'm not just saying this because as a nonprofit, we're supposed to be unbiased. I'm saying this because I want to encourage people to draw the lines between what's happening at the federal level with what's happening at the state level in Hawaii. You know, also, I'm not an expert at federal policy. That's not typically our domain of expertise at Hawaii Appleseed. We do try to advocate on occasion for certain policies, but there are folks who are far better equipped to talk about that than me. But I will get into that a little bit. So first, what's been happening recently? I'm sure all of you have been following the news to some extent. I personally try to stay away from that a little bit because it's a little bit too distressing at times. But you know, you had the Republican budget framework get approved, trillions of dollars in tax cuts coming down the pike. A debt increase of 5.7 trillion potentially. This is going to be happening over the next 10 years if all this comes to fruition. Naturally, that's going to require what? Program cuts and spending cuts totaling, I think, 1.5 trillion was the latest number that I heard. So this is what we're currently contending with, right? And as for D.O.G.E, they are certainly doing work of their own. They are aggressively pursuing DEI spending, which they have identified as a threat, woke mind virus that Elon is obsessed with. And you've already seen this in terms of contracts for the Department of Education, $881 million relating to DEI, right, getting thrown out. And then other contracts with millions of dollars in contracts being targeted across other agencies as well. And I don't have to explain to you how this could affect Hawaii because it already is, right? You have pressure now on educational institutions to abandon their principles, abandon their commitment to students who are of many different beliefs, backgrounds, and stripes. So this is real, this is happening right now, and you all are seeing it. I don't have to explain that to you, I think, quite so much. And then let's also talk about our state budget, right? In fiscal year 2024, we got 4.6 billion in federal funds. That's like 23% of our budget for a year. Anyway, 3.5 billion of that would be at the greatest risk of getting cut. And that includes Medicaid, which, you know, is funded with $2.2 billion from the federal government, followed by SNAP, $895 million. So, you know, SNAP feeding families in need, helping them remain economically secure. These things should be no-brainers as a societal good, but obviously not everybody shares the same values. And that's all to say that you all are doing the work already, from what I understand, of fighting back against these trends. You are making your voices heard, attending protests, in a lot of cases lobbying your legislators to take action and to publicly oppose all of these horrific things that are really coming down on us all too soon. But, I mean, and also, please, if you have questions later, feel free to ask me. There's a lot of ground to cover, so I'm trying to move quickly, and I might skip a few things. But you know, that's all to say that basically this whole thing was a ruse to get you to think about state policy, tax policy. But I mean, I'm only half joking. But really, I want to talk about state revenue because that's inevitably going to be affected by this picture, right? Because what happens when our state loses federal funding, or when it's at risk even, right? Just the very thought of that happening can have a lot of downstream effects, because so many thousands of local residents depend on state services and programs for basic economic support. And we have to be thinking about those people. And yes, federal advocacy is incredibly important as well, but I want to encourage all of you to think about what's happening with our state, because you can have an impact here. And I think that ideally, you know, we can sort of have a rising tide, a rising movement that is spread out across local, state, and federal levels of policy. So I think it's clear that we can't rely on the federal government to plug all the gaps in our funding. The federal government is not the most reliable actor at the moment, and who knows what the next several years will bring, right? We can hope, we can fight to the best extent that we can, but nothing is guaranteed. So the state of Hawaii already has a ton of underfunded priorities as is. I mean, there's a laundry list, right? Climate change, social services, houselessness is as endemic a problem as ever. We have two options: either cut spending or raise revenue. And, you know, as a progressive organization, we will always advocate for raising revenue on those who can pay. I know taxes are never going to be a popular conversation. Nobody wants to raise taxes. No one wants to talk about it. It's one of the first things that gets people riled up about state policy, or any kind of policy, really. Because for a lot of people, taxes are synonymous with, I'm going to pay more, which in a lot of cases is going to be true. But we want to focus really the attention on raising taxes on corporations and individuals who can afford to pay taxes, because there are plenty of those around. And I would like to give like a few options towards the end of this on how to do that effectively, I think. But this whole picture is also complicated by the fact that our state passed some pretty huge income tax cuts, which you may have heard about in the news. Which sounds like great, right? You know, like, okay, let's give away money that our state government supposedly doesn't need. We think they might need that for some things. What happens though is, okay, if you don't carefully weigh what you're doing, then you might blow a hole in the budget, which has been done. And by the year 2031, whoops, you might be losing $1.5 billion nearly in tax revenue, because you gave taxes to people who may or may not need. I'm trying to moderate my feelings on this, because I don't want to target any specific people. But that's all to say that really our state's financial picture is not looking too great, despite what some people are saying. And there's going to be a reckoning eventually. It's only a matter of time. We can only, you know, stick our heads in the sand for so long before this comes around and bites us. So again, if you have to raise taxes, then let's raise them correctly. There are many options to do so. Let's raise taxes on out-of-state folks who are coming here and doing speculative investment, raising the price of real estate, people with second homes who live in California half of the year and rent out their Airbnbs. that's fine if you want to do that, right? But I think most of us probably agree that they should be paying a little bit more, especially because property tax is super low.
And all the trillionaires who have huge mansions and bunkers here.
Yes, that's also true. Let's not forget that there are plenty, relatively a few billionaires around who have part-time residences in the state. One of them owns an entire island. That's pretty ridiculous, right? So how did that, and also that guy did not pay taxes when he purchased that because he transferred through, there's a loophole. Anyway, so there's plenty of people that we could raise taxes on without hurting actual local residents, without hurting Auntie who has a, like a $1 million home and is living off of, Social Security and help from her family. No, we're not trying to hurt people who are low to middle class and even a lot of higher class folks. We want to focus on people who are extracting wealth, right? Like multinationals. So I don't want to bore all of you with too many of the details here, but something like road-wide combined reporting, I can give you guys details later after this if you want to know. But that's, corporations are taking money out of the state because they have offshore tax havens, right? So they can shuffle money around, make it seem like they're profiting less than they really are in the state, and they just shuttle their money to the Bahamas or something. So they're taking money out of the state, and we think that that's a bad thing. Road-wide combined reporting used to be a thing in the 80s before corporate lobbyists pushed back against it and basically got it abolished. Only Alaska has like a remnant of it, which they do on oil companies. So that's an option. That could raise at least 85 million and like probably more because we don't even know the full extent to which these corporations are taking money out of the state. It's more than we think, most likely. 85 million at the very least that we could, road-wide combined reporting, which is not the best name. I didn't choose it. Road-wide combined reporting, road-wide, like across the globe, road-wide combined reporting. Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, so that's along the lines of something that we think is effective and that has popular support, because I think a lot of people in the state want, are behind the idea of taxing folks from out of state who are coming here and making a lot of money. It's like common sense, I think. So there's that. There's things like raising the corporate tax. Listen, taxes are boring, I get it, but I just want to get you all thinking about practical ways that we can shore up the state's funding. Because really, this is one of the only options that we have. And if I just get any of you to start thinking more about that, thinking more about how progressive taxation can preserve services and like lift people up, then that's all I'm trying to do here, right? Because I also think that taxes are super boring if you don't look at what the end result is going to be, right? It's not like what the ingredients in the brownies are, it's what the brownies are going to be. And the brownies are going to be things like universal basic income, where everybody just gets the money they need to survive. That's going to be actually preparing our state for the impact of climate change, right? Not just throwing a few million as problems arise or trying in vain to save houses along the shoreline that are doomed. So let's really invest in the needs, right? Let's meet the need instead of just keeping things trucking along towards like imminent disaster, I think, right? Because let's think long term. Let's not just think, over the next few years, which are going to be very bad, but policy takes time, and I know that all of you are here because you care, and I just want all of you to be, just mindful of that. And I would urge all of you to please just think beyond, what's happening with D.O.G.E, what's happening with the Trump administration, and sort of think about what is also happening around you as well, and how all of that interacts, because that's all important, I think. And yeah, that's pretty much it for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Devin. Manfred, thank you.
Aloha mai kaku. I want to start by mahaloing Nandita for inviting me to speak, and of course my fellow panelists. But my biggest mahalo goes out to all of you to come out on a Friday night, which is a real commitment. I think the kind of commitment that we need in these difficult and troubled times. So thank you. Let me start with a disclaimer. I'm not a policy expert, but I have studied political ideologies as a political sociologist for about 30 years. And therefore, what I would like to talk to you about tonight is the ideology that stands behind D.O.G.E, which really is also the ideology that stands behind Project 2025, which I think most of you are familiar with, which is the Heritage Foundation's blueprint that was developed in advance of Trump's election in 2024. And D.O.G.E is one of the things that is coming out of this blueprint. But behind D.O.G.E, behind the 2025 blueprint, there is ideologies, or is an ideology. And I want to talk to you about this ideology that is behind it, which I call techno-fascism or neoliberal fascism. You can take your pick. But let's start with necessary preliminaries first. What is, let's see, yeah, there you go. What is an ideology? So very often this term is used sort of pejoratively to talk about falsehoods or lies. And it's true, ideologies distort reality, but that's not all there is to ideologies. Think of ideologies as shared ideas and norms and values that are accepted as true by significant groups in society. And if we think about ideologies that way, you notice that we can't get away from ideologies, because ideologies are like mental maps that help us navigate our complex political environments. So we are ideological beings. And because we are ideological beings, it really matters which ideology or ideologies societies adopt. So I think we can now tackle this society that's in the process, I think, of being shaped and adopted. And unfortunately, the election already is sort of a sign that there are sufficient people who are attracted by this ideology of techno-fascism. Now, I would argue that techno-fascism is really made up of three components, or it's a confluence of three ideational currents, let's call it that. One is fascism, obviously. The second one is neoliberalism. And the third one is, that's a sort of an awkward term, let's call it technocratism. And for the remainder of my talk, I would like to talk to you about these three components. So let's start out with fascism, which, by the way, comes in many varieties. We are all familiar with the 1930s Italian fascism, German fascism, Spanish fascism, Japanese fascism. And a lot of people are saying, let's not throw around this word fascism too easily. This is really just about the 1930s, and after World War II, we can't really talk about it. I don't think so. And I'm trying to convince you that that's actually false, that we should call it what it is, this ideology behind D.O.G.E, behind Project 2025, it's fascism. So let's take 10 characteristics that most students of ideology would associate with fascism. And let's see how it sort of works out with Trumpism, with techno-fascism. So the first criterion is irrationalism. So think of Trump's lies, think of conspiracy theories, think of fabrications, the unwillingness to discuss rationally, particularly think back to his appearance in the debate with Kamala Harris. Think of things like Haitian immigrants eating cats. I think there's a pretty good case to be made that there's a lot of irrationalism there. The second criterion is social Darwinism, right? The idea that only the fittest survive, and that is a natural principle that also applies to societies. Well, think of Trump's zero-sum worlds of winners and losers. That's the world that he lives in which only the winners go on to greatness. So it's the sense that there are a few winners, a few great people, and the other select ones, and they are the ones who really should sort of push society forward. The third characteristic is extreme nationalism and militarism. So, of course, make America great again, America first. But there are also really interesting titles of executive orders and policy blueprints that this administration has adopted. So one of them, for example, is called the New Foundation of American Greatness. And on it goes. So again, I think we can all agree that there's a pretty extreme nationalism as part of this ideology. The fourth is the use of paramilitary violence, which we're all familiar with Hitler stormtroopers, for example, right? And we are seeing the beginnings. I'm just thinking of January 6th and the insurrectionists. The fifth characteristic is leadership principle, absolute loyalty to the leader, one leader. I alone can fix it, right? I'm a stable genius. I'm king, literally, that's what he said. So, you know, bending the GOP to his will, all of those things, I think, show that this is an ideology that is very much reflective of the leadership principle. The sixth criterion is racism. So, think of neo-Nazis in Charlottesville, right? They're good people on both sides, he said. Think of Mexican rapists, the demonization of critical race theory. And more recently, today in the New York Times, we find that the Naval Academy Library has removed Maya Angelou's books, but Hitler's Mein Kampf is still there. The seventh characteristic of fascism is misogyny and traditional patriarchal values. So, of course, we all can think about Trump's nasty women, grabbing women by their genitals, his abortion views, and so on. These public abortion views, of course. The eighth is anti-communism. So, the demonization of Bernie Sanders and the AOC is portrayed as crazy communists. Attack on left-wing academics who are being portrayed falsely as communists. So it's sort of this return to the 1950s McCarthy era of a witch hunt and communists infiltrating our country everywhere. The ninth criterion is state superiority. So this is the sort of administration's doctrine of executive absolutism, right? The executive power, the president, is the strongest power, and in some cases, and we'll see, hopefully I'm wrong, it will override the separation of powers and maybe ignore what the courts have to say. And the final characteristic of fascism is territorial expansion and acquisition of land by violence if necessary. Think of the Panama Canal, think of Greenland, think of Canada, and so on and so forth. And if you think that he's joking about Greenland, he is not joking about Greenland. I can guarantee you that he is extremely interested in acquiring that in probably less than 12 months. Okay, so in short, Trump's techno-fascism meets all of these 10 criteria of fascism. That's why I call it fascism. The second component of techno-fascism is neoliberalism, which also comes in many varieties. It's an economic doctrine that can be boiled down to the idea that government and all social institutions should be run like private business. So, in order to achieve this goal, neoliberalism wants to sort of get into power, into the state, in order to sort of dismantle certain kinds of institutions, which again reflects what's been happening with D.O.G.E. We can call it ungoverning, the deliberate effort to dismantle the capacity of government to interfere with the free market economy, particularly the sort of big tech corporate economy. There are three basic principles in neoliberalism which boil down to what's called the DLP formula. D stands for deregulation of the economy. L stands for liberalization of trade, and this is where Trump has a sort of a problem, and I'll get back to that. And privatization of state-owned enterprises or privatization of any sort of common good. And here, of course, we can think about the privatization of prisons, of education, of space exploration, of waste management, of water delivery, of the post office, and so on and so forth. So DLP, deregulation, liberalization, privatization, runs on hyper-competition. It promises to eliminate bureaucratic red tape, increase efficiency, so-called efficiency and productivity, improve quality of products, reduce costs for consumers and taxpayers. So again, I think that maybe with the question of liberalization of trade, which we get back to later, it pretty much fits the bill. Third component of technofascism is technocratism, which is the belief, the anti-democratic belief, that there is to be or there should be a rule by technocratic experts who are the smartest and best members of society. So Plato's philosopher kings become Musk's tech kings, right? Now, that means there is an autocratic rule by technocrats. There are early technocratic movements in the 1930s, interesting, because that matches with fascism. In Japan, for example, in the 1930s, when Manchuria was taken over, Japanese technocrats were sent to Manchuria in order to set up a technocratic industrialization of Manchuria, a technocratic role. But there are also roots in 1930s, the United States. So for example, I don't know how many of you know, Musk's grandfather, Joshua Haldeman, was in the 1930s one of the leaders of a political movement that was called technocracy. And it aimed to replace democratically elected officials and civil servants in the US with an army of scientists and engineers. They called themselves the Technate. And their members supposedly all were required to no longer have ordinary names, but a combination of names and numbers. And as we all know, Musk's is I would say, the current form of the Technate, and one of his sons is called XAEA-12. Technocrats like Musk believe that liberal democracy has failed because it is based, he thinks, on the false principle that all humans are created equal. What is needed to unseat liberal democracy, once again, is ungoverning, the creative destruction of existing liberal administrative state institutions. The ultimate goal is to replace regular processes of governing with the personal rule of technocrats, politicians. And I want you to really remember this, because a lot of people say it doesn't make sense what he's doing. Why is he destroying all of this? The point is to replace all these institutions that run according to democratic principles, to make it easier to rebuild them with principles that are based upon the loyalty to technocrats/politicians. So there's a difference between governing for the common good and ruling according to arbitrary will. So again, Musk's D.O.G.E. is at the vanguard of dismantling American liberal democracy and its institutions and ushering in what we could call a big tech civilization, where the ethical principles of empathy and compassion are replaced by cold neoliberal principles of instrumental rationality, efficiency, and AI. To sum up then, the ideology of D.O.G.E and the 2025 project that stands behind this is techno-fascism or neoliberal fascism. It is based on the integration of major components of these three thought systems. Of course there are differences. Of course there are discords among fascism, technocratism, and neoliberalism, but there are also a lot of synergies. In other words, the ideological integration process that we are seeing now among these three to create techno-fascism is not always smooth. Think, for example, of the rivalry that we're already seeing between Musk and Steve Bannon. So finally, let me say, on a constructive note, what can be done, especially on an ideological level, to counteract technocratic or techno-fascism? I don't have the time to go into detail, but I would like to leave you with one concrete proposal. Liberals, progressives, egalitarians, straight out emphatic or compassionate people need to exploit the fissures and the contradictions that are being created now by this integration process that is happening in techno-fascism, this rocky integration. As the Italian anti-fascist politician Antonio Gramsci urged in the 1930s, we need to recreate a vibrant civil society based on broad-based solidarity rather than narrow identity thinking. In such an anti-fascist popular front, new narratives and ideas would seize on these contradictions and fissures of techno-fascism's process. Take, for example, this is the final example, the current global tariff disaster ushered in by Trump. His over-reliance on economic nationalism, which angered his neoliberal and technocratic friends. This is one of techno-fascism's many weak integration points that beckons to a democratic left to launch a counter-narrative that appeals to large segments of working people. And techno-fascism has many more weaknesses that lend themselves to relentless ideological counterattacks by all of us, a democratic multitude. Mahalo.
Thank you very much, Manfred. David?
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me? A little bit closer, okay. Okay, good evening, everyone. My name is Dave Day. I am the Special Assistant to the Attorney General for the state of Hawaii. I, along with Solicitor General Kaliko Fernandez, are co-leading a team of approximately 10 attorneys at the Department of the Attorney General who are acting to respond to the illegal activities, which there are many, unfortunately, that the Trump administration has lodged in these approximately 2 months and 3 weeks, 4 weeks now, which sounds very depressing, but ultimately it's something that we very much value doing. It's something that sometimes is very depressing, but being at an event like this is rejuvenating for those of us to know that people care about these issues and the things that we're fighting for. To date, we have sued the Trump administration 12 times. In separate cases in less than 3 months. That's not something that we set out to do. It's not like we're looking for trouble or looking for a fight. It's just the fact that this is what's been presented to us. I'm counsel for the state of Hawaii in 10 of these cases, which relate to what I'll call direct D.O.G.E cases, or those that are D.O.G.E adjacent, and those relate to the philosophy or policy underlining it. These all concern basically 3 major concepts. The illegal dismantling of congressionally authorized government agencies, the illegal freezing or termination of federal grants or funding streams to the states, the counties, and nonprofits, and the illegal suspension or termination of federal employees. Before I get into the specific cases that are these what are these D.O.G.E cases, I'd like to sort of frame it within sort of my understanding and what I've learned in litigating these cases against the United States Department of Justice, and sort of the lessons that I've learned. And so first, I'd just like to kind of begin with a parable. And I'd like to begin by referencing a famous Russian trope. This is something that existed both in the imperial days and even today. And it regards something in literature and otherwise about how Russian peasants viewed the Tsar. And people would say, the peasants would say when they're having some problem, the Tsar he's this holy and just man, the holy Tsar. But he's being misled by his advisors and the nobles and the boyars. And they are leading him astray. If only we could speak to the Tsar, he would give us justice. In reality, though, as we know, the Russian emperor and the empress were autocrats. And but they used this myth to their advantage in terms of allowing them to deflect the criticism that was going to be bandied about regarding the problems inherent in their regime. And now, just to be crystal clear, by this I am not implying by any means that the president is holy or just, like in the trope. As with the Russian emperor, it's quite the opposite. But I do wish to demystify and deconstruct the so-called Department of Government Efficiency. Much that has been said about Elon Musk and the people who work for this entity, although much of who work for this entity, there can be much that can be said, although much of what is done by this entity is shrouded in secrecy, so there's actually not much that is widely known. But I wish to begin by stating a truism, that whatever Elon Musk's objectives, and however callous the manner he executes those objectives, it is done in the name of the president to effectuate his political agenda. And having Elon Musk absorb all of the hate and criticism of an angry people benefits the president. This is not a political opinion. It is inherent in the legal document that created D.O.G.E, or D.O.G.E. The so-called Department of Government Efficiency was created on day one of the Trump presidency by an executive order on January 20th, 2025. The purpose of the executive order was to, quote, establish the Department of Government Efficiency to implement the president's D.O.G.E agenda. D.O.G.E is established in the executive order, established in the executive office of the presidency, and is again, quote, dedicated to advancing the president's 18-month D.O.G.E agenda, end quote, with the D.O.G.E's existence to terminate on July 4th, 2026. This is why just listening to Professor Steger's presentation about the ideology about this is important. Because this is why, because what I view D.O.G.E, first and foremost, is not a department, it's not Elon Musk, but it's the president's, quote, D.O.G.E agenda. And what does this consist of in reality? I'll leave the sociology professors to debate what the philosophical underpinnings of these are. But this is how it manifests itself in reality, on the ground, and with real-world impacts. Perhaps its most definitive feature is that it is entirely and completely opposed to unions, workers' rights, and the dignity of federal civil servants. This manifests itself in multiple ways, from the closure of agencies, to massive rifts or layoffs, to the invocation of arcane provisions that prohibit government employees from having union protections. Anybody who's working or who knows and has contacted these unions who represent government employees know that those unions are being absolutely routed right now. And it's through no fault of their own, but they are facing it on every single front, perhaps more than anybody. It is then, the second feature of this is the indiscriminate freezing or termination of congressionally appropriated government grants and funding streams to states, to counties, and to nonprofits. And then finally, it is the slashing of regulations, particularly those that are intended to protect the public or the environment from harm. In many ways, the government and the principles of D.O.G.E, for people that I believe are in this room, is that everything that once was good is bad, and everything that once was bad is now good under the new regime, or the new administration, excuse me. So given the time limitations, I'm going to focus on a few cases, although we have 10, and I'm happy to speak of it. We do have 2 cases which I'll call direct D.O.G.E cases, which I'll just briefly go into. The first one is filed in the Southern District of New York. It was at the early stages of D.O.G.E when Elon Musk and others were attempting to go into the Treasury. And we obtained a preliminary injunction against him doing that. The second case is a case called New Mexico versus Musk. This is in the District of Columbia. This is one that's a direct challenge to Elon Musk's legitimacy. And the argument is that he is an unelected and unconfirmed individual exercising the powers of somebody who needs to be confirmed, appointed by the president, and confirmed by the Senate. And the relief that's being sought in that case is essentially to invalidate the actions of D.O.G.E. But I think that those, even though these are direct actions regarding D.O.G.E, again, I do not believe that the entity itself is the issue, it's the underlying policies. And so what I'd like to do is discuss some of the most significant cases which I believe reflect the D.O.G.E policies. Perhaps the most important case currently in the defense of state interests throughout the nation is a case which we refer to as the OMB case. It's entitled New York versus Trump. Hawaii is a plaintiff in this case. It addressed on January 27th the memorandum of the acting director of the Office of Management and Budget. And there's much to unpack here, and so I'm going to quote a little bit from the memorandum. What it said is financial assistance, quote, financial assistance should be dedicated to advancing the administration's priorities, focusing taxpayer dollars to, among other things, end wokeness. This is the major sort of picadillo of this administration, which can kind of be summed up and generally as anything that is woke is the enemy of the state. Now, what does wokeness mean? According to this memorandum, it is, quote, the use of federal resources to advance Marxist equity, transgenderism, and Green New Deal social engineering policies as a waste of taxpayer dollars that does not improve the day-to-day lives of those we serve. It was for this reason that the OMB directed that all federal agencies must temporarily pause all financial disbursements to allow for the weeding out of money going to, quote, DEI, woke gender ideology, and the Green New Deal. And that was the basis for what happened the next day when we woke up in the state of Hawaii and basically every single federal funding stream that the state relies on was turned off. It was an emergency that basically we had never expected or foreseen. We are talking about things, not just things relating to immigration or grants of, that would relate to DEI or something like that. We're talking about SNAP. We're talking about Medicaid. We're talking about those types of serious, significant things that people rely on that were turned off that day. And we filed suit that very day. The next day, the Trump administration purported to rescind this memorandum when they realized that they were going to be in trouble. But then the press secretary made a blunder. The press secretary said, yes, we received the memorandum, or we rescinded the memorandum, but the policy remains in place. And this, I think, relates to one of the defining characteristics of Mr. Trump, which is his hubris and his narcissism, is that he couldn't chalk up the loss, is that he felt that he needed to score some sort of victory, and ultimately that didn't work out to his favor. We obtained a preliminary injunction in that case to unfreeze what's called categorical freezes of federal funding that were dispersed to the plaintiff states. And we're talking about 9 figures worth of grants and other funds that were congressionally appropriated and allocated to the states for various purposes that were unfrozen. What we found in this case was that the Trump administration was very, very, very slow and unwilling to fully comply. And in fact, on 2 separate occasions, we had to file motions to enforce. This is something short of a motion for contempt, but a motion to enforce the preliminary injunction because of non-compliance, and they were granted in both instances. The OMB litigation is significant because it prevents what happened on January 27th. It prevents the federal funding that goes to fund government from being categorically shut off for no reason whatsoever other than the will of the president. The second case I'd like to talk about is one that's just kind of a precursor to other actions that happened with respect to government agencies, the mistreatment of government workers, and the shutdown of government agencies. It's a case called American Federation of Government Employees versus ESL. This is not one that the state was a plaintiff in, but this is one that the state of Hawaii took the national lead on for the democratic states in filing an amicus brief in support of the workers. This lawsuit concerned a directive of the Trump administration called Fork in the Road. Now, Fork in the Road was something that Elon Musk used when he was at Twitter, which basically said that either you get with the program and you say that you want to be a part of this, or you get out and we'll give you a buyout. Or is it, we'll give you a buyout, but if you stay and ultimately you don't agree and something happens, we're going to can you. And this is what he presented to civil servants who have dedicated their lives to public service, who deserve to be treated with respect, and basically provided them with an ultimatum. One that said that you have 9 days to decide whether you want to resign and get a small buyout where you would basically not have to show up to work but get your salary and benefits for approximately 8 months, or probably get riffed and sent out on the street. This violates numerous legal principles, among others that federal employees are supposed to actually work to get their salaries. That's not something that was undone by this directive. Unfortunately, in that case, there was a standing doctrine issue that allowed, or that basically hindered the union's ability to move forward with their suit, and that directive did move forward. One of the things that was so sort of indicative of the way that that the workers were treated is that when they asked questions, they were given different answers on various days. The instructions changed from day to day. Some people accepted the buyout and later were told that the offer was not extended to them. And so now they had already said that they wanted out and they were forced to come back to work. And this is sort of the climate in which people were forced to work. And then from that, I'll go to a case called Maryland versus the United States Department of Agriculture. This is a case that involved the termination of probationary employees en masse. And so probationary employees have a special federal status that give them less rights than others. And this was something that occurred across numerous departments. This was definitely a Department of Government Efficiency-led initiative. The states filed suit on the grounds that it would cause massive harm to the states to lose so much of a federal workforce upon which we depended. And we did obtain a preliminary injunction which allowed those workers, or actually required those workers, to be placed back on the payroll and come back to work. But in one of the first instances where something has gotten to the Supreme Court of the United States, in an opinion, not in our case, but in a related opinion, basically required that that be placed on hold, the preliminary injunction, such that since that time, those workers which had been brought back, many of them have been riffed again. And some may say that this sounds cruel, but I would note that the Trump Office of Management and Budget Director Russell Vought, according to a ProPublica video, had said this back in 2024. We want the bureaucrats to be traumatically affected. When they wake up in the morning, we want them to not want to go to work because they are increasingly viewed as the villains. We want their funding to be shut down. We want to put them in trauma. So the fact is that this is that what is happening to the federal workers in this country and the traumatic situation they are being put in, the impossible situations they are being put in, is not an accident. It is actually part of the plan. I have just two more cases I'd like to discuss. I know that I'm going to be running short of time. The first one is called New York versus McMahon. and this is a state that's being this is a suit that's being led by the Department of the Attorney General, along with the states of California, New York, and Massachusetts. And this is a challenge to the directives of the Trump administration and of Linda McMahon, the former pro wrestling magnate's wife, who is now the Secretary of Education, who instituted a 50% reduction in force at the U.S. Department of Education, which caused it not to be able to meet its statutory obligations. In numerous instances, student aid, funding for K through 12 education, services for students with disabilities, civil rights enforcement, and the like. Trump has called for the complete destruction and dismantling of the Department of Education, and the state of Hawaii is leading the national effort to stop this. We have a hearing on the preliminary injunction on May 25th, 2025. The final case I'll just highlight, and there are other cases, and we can talk about this at another time. There's many that relate to funding. The last one I'd like to highlight is one called Rhode Island versus Trump. This is another state, or another case that Hawaii is a lead state on. We're leading this case along with Rhode Island and New York. It's a suit in the District of Rhode Island, and it concerns the complete dismantling of the Institute for Museum and Library Services, along with the Minority Business Development Authority and the Federal Mediation and Conciliation Service. We are seeking a preliminary injunction on the grounds that the dismantling of the Institute for Museum Library Services is illegal as a congressionally authorized agency. It may be small, but I will tell you this, is what I have learned from this case, is that librarians, you do not want to mess with librarians. You just don't. There are many people who kind of, the big law firms, and these big law firms cow before the power of this president, but the librarians, they are like, where is my battle axe? I want to go to battle. And I really want to really recognize as well the Hawaii State Librarian, Stacey Aldridge, who is a real supporter of this action, and who believes that library services are so essential to our islands. And the hearing on this is next week, April 18th, 2025, on the motion for preliminary injunction. The question is why? And I just like that, and this is not poignant in any way. If anyone watched Game of Thrones, this is a quote from Game of Thrones. But there was a, when speaking about power, about one individual, there was a character who said, this character would burn the kingdom to the ground if he could be the king of the ashes. In many respects, I believe that that is what we are seeing here, and there was an echo the professor's statements regarding this, is that this is about the dismantling of the democratic structures of this nation, about these things that we came to rely on and depend on, which apparently do not jive with this particular president's beliefs. And I don't know what that says about his beliefs, but I'll leave that to you. But ultimately, the Department of the Attorney General is working extremely hard to fight for the people of Hawaii, for civil rights, for the truth, for the rule of law. And I'm incredibly proud of our efforts. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm sure all of you would agree with me that that was a fantastic set of talks. I learned a lot. So I thank you, Devin, Manfred, and David. That was really helpful. I must apologize because I forgot to thank everyone who made this possible. So let me just do that right now. First and foremost, Harris United Methodist Church, the Church and Society Group, which is sponsoring us and hosting us tonight. Thank you so much. Harris has been a real friend of people fighting for justice and liberty, from Trump 1.0 to Trump 2.0. So really, really, thank you so much. Also, our other co-sponsor, which is Indivisible Hawaii. Thank you very, very much. and of course, all of the Hawaii J20 volunteers. Without them, we would have no food, we would have no water, we'd have no chairs to sit on. we wouldn't be here. So if you could all stand up and let everyone know who you are and wave your hands. Thank you so much, everyone. The last forum in March, a lot of us were left with the realization that a lot of people want to be actively engaged in this struggle, and people are looking for concrete, real ways to get involved. So there's, we had a bit of a brainstorming session, and there's several things that I wanted to mention to you. One is both Indivisible Hawaii and J20 have been part of distributing these Know Your Rights stickers. The QR code on these stickers will lead you to a document that you can print out Know Your Rights information in all of the major languages that are spoken by immigrants in Hawaii. Now we know, of course, that the Trump administration, while I think this is very fittingly when we call it a regime, is now talking about going after citizens for deportation as well. So this is something that all of us are going to have to really very clearly understand how to protect ourselves from. The second thing, of course, is to join J20. We need you. We need you to help us decide what to do and how to do it. Our next regular meeting is this Sunday, which is Sunday, April 13th at 2 o'clock. We meet at the Manoa Saunders Hall courtyard, which is the ground floor of Saunders Hall at Manoa. So 2 o'clock this Sunday, please consider joining us.
Nandita, can you just describe what the J20 is?
Oh.
What it stands for?
Hawaii J20. J20 is just the day of inauguration. It's the day when the struggle starts for real. And we're looking forward to the next J20 when hopefully this, we get paid back for this struggle and we no longer have fascists in power. We're also going to be hosting a meeting for all activists who are currently planning activities. Some of you may get frequent messages, come to this protest, come to that protest. We could be doing something every day. But we think that there is a need to coordinate our activities so that we don't have burnout, so that we have a clear strategy of what we're doing going forward. And in particular, one of the things is we need a coordinated plan for what we are all going to do when the impending constitutional crisis is here, right? That might be tomorrow. So this meeting might be a bit late, but we are planning a meeting for all activists on April 27th at 2 p.m. At Manoa Saunders Hall courtyard. So all of that information will be on Hawaii J20's website, which is hawaiij20.com. The other thing that you can do that some of us have been doing now for several weeks is protesting every Wednesday and Friday at the Waikiki Tesla dealership. Every Wednesday and Friday from 5 to 6 p.m. It is absolutely true. I couldn't agree more with David that Musk is not the pinnacle of the problem, but it is very, very effective way to mobilize people because a lot of people are angry at Musk, and it allows us to talk about the relationship between Musk and Trump, right? Another thing, of course, you can do is join Indivisible. And one of the things that Indivisible and J20 is currently collaborating with is working with a team to gather stories from people in Hawaii who are directly enduring, experiencing, and suffering as a result of Trump's actions. So people are trying to collect and amplify the story so that we can document proof of harm. We can contribute to the historical record, we can empower the storytellers, and we can amplify their stories to other people to get people motivated to act. So if you have a story to share, please visit the Indivisible table in the on the side over here to learn how to submit your story. I also thank you to all of the people and organizations that are here with us. ACLU Hawaii, a very, very important friend in the struggle. And, you know, the Legal Clinic for Immigrants, the General Strike Hawaii, the 5051 organization. Thank you, all of you. If I'm forgetting anyone, I apologize. Last thing that I wanted to mention is that, as you may know, Representative Ed Case was, yes, that one. Representative Ed Case was one of 4 Democrats who voted with Republicans to disenfranchise voters with the so-called SAVE Act. It is a targeted effort to disenfranchise those who have a harder time securing citizenship documents, such as poor people, people not born in hospitals, naturalized citizens, especially those targeted by anti-immigrant politics, and up to 69 million women, including many of us here tonight, who took on their spouses' last names, who could now face discrepancies between their IDs and voter registration, right? So Ed Case voted to jeopardize our voting rights. We will be protesting at Ed Case's office. I actually forgot to write down the date.
Wednesday, 11:30.
This coming Wednesday, which is April 16th, thank you. So Wednesday, April 16th at 11:30 a.m. Details will be sent out via the Indivisible and J20 MailChimps.
Mention one thing that's important for everybody to know, and maybe most people know it here tonight, but if you want to broaden, politics is addition. You want to broaden, what this act does is prevents registration. It's not voting. You won't even get to have your vote suppressed if you can't register. And that's what this is aimed at. I've been talking to some people, and they think it has to do with, they're trying to stop people from voting. I wish we could get to, we have to get to that problem, but it's to stop registration. That's why this vote by Representative Case is incomprehensible.
Yeah, thank you, Governor Abercrombie, for noting that this is a direct act at voter suppression, right? Yeah.
And it's nothing else but.
Yeah, and it's absolutely shameful that we have a representative in Hawaii, the bluest of blue states, going along with the Republican agenda on this. It's outrageous. So join us Wednesday, 11:30 at Ed Case's office. Watch out for the information about that. So now it's your turn. It's time for Q&A. This microphone will be moved. And so if you could please come forward. Amy, I see that you are raring to go. Yes, thank you.
Yay, Amy.
I just wanted to give the details about that nitwit, Mr. Ed Case. Please join us on Wednesday at, is it 10:30? 11:30. And the address for his office is 1001 Bishop Street. He's not at the federal building. I just wanted to make clear he's on Bishop Street. And if you can't go, you should make a telephone call to, let's see, Ed Case. Ed Case's phone numbers are 808-650-6688. And you can also call Washington, D.C., 202-225-2726. They hate phone calls, so you can do it at night even. So please make phone calls to Ed Case's D.C. office and Honolulu office.
Did you say the Bishop Street address again?
1003. It's sort of near Tamron Park.
1003. 1003.
Could you call? They can't hear you.
Yeah, we've done this before.
This is Lisa Gibson, the lead force behind Indivisible Hawaii.
Yeah. So we're going to meet there at 11:30. The security guys won't allow you to protest in Tamarind Park, so we're going to be around the sidewalks. We're going to come up with some signs. Bring your signs. Ed is out of the country. He's not going to be here. So we may try and get a stick figure or something.
Effigy, do I hear? No.
Yeah. So I just wanted to say, gather around the edges. You'll see people with signs. Okay. Thank you.
And just before the next question, we have a donation box that we will be circulating. Feel no pressure to donate, but we would appreciate anything that you can help us to continue to organize these events. Thank you.
Yeah, I have a question for David. How are the attorney generals? I think there are 20 or 23 of them. How are they organized? A lot of the cases, all of the cases that you said was Rhode Island versus New York versus. So how are the attorney generals organized nationally?
Sure. So there are, in our coalition, there are 23 attorneys general from 22 states and the District of Columbia. This coalition is one of shared values and of shared beliefs and priorities. We meet regularly. The attorneys generals are in contact with each other on a regular basis about what is going on. The attorneys general staff, of which I am one, also meet and speak 5 times a week about all the issues that are arising at any given time, along with the pending litigation that comes up. There's a common interest that we have in all of this. It is incredibly rewarding to work with such a broad array of bright lawyers from around the country in addressing these issues, and I think it's through the unity of our coalition that we've been so successful to date. There certainly will be hard days, but we have, I think that the organization that we have, the coalitions that we have, are really acting towards the benefit of all.
I am completely confused about how it is possible for DOGE to do what it's doing. He has no standing in the government. The Congress has already set those things up. How is it possible that someone that comes in with why do the people in those agencies yield to him when it's completely unlawful? But they all exit because he says so. Why don't they stand on what the law? I just can't understand it.
So obviously I'm going to have to speculate about what would make somebody do that. It's not something that I would do.
But whole agencies are...
You're talking about the dismantling of agencies?
Yes.
Yes. Yes, we do believe that that is extremely illegal. And so when we're speaking about things like the Institute for Museum and Library Services, or even large departments like the Department of Education, that's unbelievable that we would be in a situation where something that is congressionally constituted has existed in some form almost since Ulysses S. Grant was the President of the United States. I think that that's one of the reasons why we filed suit in that case, is to challenge that. The fact is that the Attorney General of the United States right now does not share the same values and beliefs, I think, in the rule of law that I think that other Attorneys General... That's right.
Yeah. It's called the Constitution.
Yeah, but I mean...
They don't care. They don't care.
I'll let other people are saying wonderful things right now, so, in the audience.
But the people that work there, they know what their rights are. Why do they let somebody come in and throw them out?
So you're speaking about the workers?
Yes.
Well, I think that the unions are, and so I don't want to speak too much for the unions in these cases. There are some wonderful unions that are truly, truly fighting 24 hours a day for their workers, and I'm talking about the American Federation of State, County, and municipal employees, along with the National Association for Government Employees, the American Federation for Government Employees. They all have many, many members who are in this. The fact is that there are certain laws that provide for RIFs. I think that they're violating it all over the place. They're doing their best. They are doing their best. It has been difficult for the unions so far in their legal challenges. Ultimately, the states have limited standing, legal standing, when it comes to address issues regarding federal workers. That's something that's normally outside of our ken. I think that we have standing, and we actually achieved a preliminary injunction in a case relating to the termination of probationary employees. This was hundreds of thousands of government employees across 22 departments. But ultimately, the U.S. Supreme Court stayed that decision earlier this week, or their decision led to the stay of this. This is one of the many things that we, as a coalition, we here in Hawaii, have to take note of, is the fact that the highest court of this country is not what it once was about 10 years ago. So, and that's a reality in our system of government, and certainly in the judicial system, that is just something that we have to confront and face, and there are going to be tough days because of that.
Thank you.
And I think very simply, if I can just add a footnote here, our political system has, as you know, 3 branches, and the executive branch was created for dispatch, for quickness. It can execute the laws, and if the president signs an executive order, it's an executive order that can be challenged by the courts, but the courts are slow and have to catch up with it. And ultimately, if the courts rule against him on that, and he defies the courts, then we are in a territory where we no longer have our Constitution that he swore to uphold, upheld. So the reason for why it's happening is because of the difference of speed by which these 2 branches of government work.
David, to follow up on your last point a little bit, the United States Supreme Court, through all of these cases that you and others are bringing, have the potential to radically reshape the country, and we do know that there's a 6-3 conservative liberal split. 3 of those justices have, in the very few cases that have come up, 1 or 2 of them have occasionally voted with the 3 liberals. At risk of asking you to disclose legal strategy, but just can you comment on any straws in the wind from the rulings thus far or from the past about what might happen and what might be the best approach to take in these cases?
I think the best approach to take in these cases is to create the best possible evidentiary record in support of our legal theories. One of the things that we've done very, very well to date is to organize and mobilize the people who are affected by a given government action and be able to present their sworn testimony in the record. And so just as an example, with respect to the Institute for Museum and Library Services, we had multiple government agencies from the state of Hawaii that presented declarations in support of our motion for preliminary injunction. That was the state librarian, Stacey Aldrich. We received 2 declarations from the University of Hawaii. We received a declaration from the Friends of the Judiciary History Center, all of which is a museum, among others, that basically were willing to put their names in the record, which some people are very uncomfortable with because of fears of retaliation, but ultimately we're willing to stand up for this. And so what we do is we create the best possible legal record with the evidence. We do the best possible legal arguments that we try to frame in a way that will, we think, appeal to not just the liberal wing of the Supreme Court, but others. And we use all our wits to try to do that. I'm not saying it's going to work in every occasion, but that's the challenge that we face, and one that we are willing to take on.
This is a little bit of a two-part question. One of the parts has to do with the actual adherence to what judges and courts advise or okay, one of the questions has to do with the actual adherence to what judges and courts adjudicate. And it's clear that Trump's administration, regime, has very little intention of adhering to judges, such as Judge Boasberg, who he's ready to impeach for ruling against him. And apparently this man who's sitting in, an innocent man who's sitting in San Salvador, is still sitting in San Salvador, regardless of whether several judges have demanded he be returned. That's one thing. So that's one side of the perversion of justice here that's going on that I think is linked to another. And it has a lot to do with the law and legality and language. Manfred, how do you account in a fascist society like this one has become, where lawyers, top lawyers of Jewish law firms are being railroaded and extorted into voting against anti-Semitism or going along with Trump's version of anti-Semitism? This is a regime which, as you just pointed out, is using Mein Kampf as its handbook. How does this work together with this very strange reasoning for closing down universities, law firms, libraries, bookstores, in the name of anti-Semitism, in the name of fighting anti-Semitism?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I would repeat what I said is really, really critical to understand. We have to understand the difference between governing and ruling. So governing tends to be, in our system, a democratic way in which we apply our laws, in which we build our bureaucracies, our institutions, and it is not dependent on the will of a single person or a small elite of rulers who rule according to their desires, not according to the common good. So what is happening right now is ungoverning. Remember that, ungoverning. Ungoverning is the process of destroying all institutions, or as many institutions as possible, that stand in the way of the arbitrary will of the ruler. Which means that any and all means will be used to achieve the goal of ungoverning. Anti-Semitism is one of those. It's a term, a blanket term, that is used out of the contest between Palestinians in Gaza and the State of Israel. That's the context. It is used as a hammer to ungovern, to implement the DEI agenda, to implement all kinds of other agendas that have nothing to do with anti-Semitism. So all fascists are interested in ungoverning, in replacing governing for the common good with the arbitrary will of the ruler to whom everybody has to be absolutely loyal. And all and any means are being used in this process, and this is what we are seeing here. It doesn't seem to make sense to us because we think these institutions are helpful. We know they provide programs that are important, that are vital for people's survival. But from the point of view of the ruler,
They are standing in the way of his arbitrary will. He needs to replace them with, in the case of Hitler, Volksgerichtshof, People's Court. The People's Court was ruled in the name of Adolf Hitler and was just implementing whatever the will of the ruler was. So that is what is happening. Anti-Semitism is a means to ungoverning.
And Manfred, may I just PS, all this is done at the same time, chaos upon chaos upon chaos, flooding the zone. So we don't have time to process the travesty of 1 hour ago with the next one.
I just wanted to add, just before you ask your question, I just wanted to add to the question that you had, Pearl, about why the Trump administration is, using anti-Semitism as the rationale for targeting people. I think it's really important for us to remember that what made anti-Semitism unacceptable was the fight against racism, right? Was the fight against Nazis, right? It was the realization after World War II of the horrors of the Nazi regime and the way that they used racism to legitimate or try and make sense of what they were doing, right? Jewish people were, quote unquote, an inferior race that must be eliminated for the good of the German nation, right? It was us, when I say us, I wasn't born then, but it was people like us, right? Anti-racist, people fighting for justice, who made anti-Semitism something that should not happen. So the other thing about fascists is that they change their scapegoats according to the time and place, right? Today's scapegoats were not yesterday's scapegoats. Today's scapegoats are migrants, people who are categorized as migrants. That category barely existed in the 1930s and 40s, right? That's the category of people today that Trump is going after, that today's fascists here in the United States and around the world are going after, right? Muslims. Right? Muslims are a major scapegoat for this administration and for fascists around the world, right? So it's a moving target. So we need to be as flexible as the fascists are in recognizing how things are moving, which is not to say that Jewish people are not under attack and that there is no more anti-Semitism. Clearly there is. Right? But it's the manipulation of something that we helped to delegitimize that they are now using to attack us again, right? So we need to be very, very flexible in our response.
Hi, thank you. My name's Jill Warning, and I am going to do a two-part. I'm going to just give a little more information about the storytelling, and then I do have a question about how that relates to everything that you've talked about tonight. The storytelling initiative that was listed as one of the concrete things we can do came out of that intuition that empathy, compassion, and connection are so important. So I was very excited to hear Professor Steger say tonight that we know there are so many weak points in techno-fascism and how you have some examples of how we can attack those. So I want to hear more about that. And just to share, when this is over and we're at the table, we're looking for stories, but also we have a very small team, so we're also looking for people who have skills in producing stories, in writing, Indivisible, Hawaii, yep, and all the parts that go into that. So many hands will make this work, and yeah, I'm just interested to hear how telling stories, how those little things that might not relate to some of the very important work we're hearing about tonight, how we can do that with our neighbors, with people who are apolitical or think that they are, and examples of how that relates to the techno-fascism we talked about.
Thank you. This is so important. You know, very often we say, well, this is just a story. This doesn't really have anything to do with reality. It's just a story. But think about the story that Trump has been telling for the last 10 years. Think of the story back in the early 2010s when very few people were listening to him. Think of the story in 2015 even when people say he's never going to get the nomination of the GOP and so on. The story grew. More and more people bought into the story. More and more people were telling variations on this story, additions to this story. And the story is very simple. America is in decline. There are scapegoats inside and outside that are responsible for this. I alone can fix it and lead you to restore America to the way it used to be. The way it used to be was that men were in charge. Think of the manosphere now, right? And women, uppity women, were where they were supposed to be. Blacks were where they're supposed to be. Minorities were where they were supposed to be. The Senate, the American Senate, was all white men. So that's sort of where we're going. That's the story. Some of the story is not explicitly told, but it's a dog whistle we can understand. So what we need to do to answer this, and this is why this story initiative is so important, is please don't think that stories are just stories. Stories build reality. Stories build institutions. Stories build and educate children. That's why we read to our children. That's why we tell them stories. We are absolutely suckers for stories from the time we are born until we die. So we have to tell stories, counter stories, counter narratives. How do we do this? Well, we can only do it collectively. Somebody has an idea, the idea gets bounced around, and then some good ideas emerge, some better stories emerge, these stories spread. We now have social media, we have all kinds of things we can use, the techno-fascist tools to our purpose to some extent. So we need to spread those stories. We need to tell counter stories. So please, if you can, thank you, Jill, be part of a storytelling civil society that tells stories that are different from the Trumpist story. Thank you.
You can go to stories at indivisible.org.
Nobody can hear you. I think that she was saying go to stories@indivisible.org. Stories@indivisible.hawaii.org. That looks like, that sounds like an email address.
It is. It'll get your email, it'll connect you with Jill.
It'll connect you with Jill.
Hi. I just had a question mostly for David, which was, you had mentioned 2 hearings that were upcoming. One is this Wednesday, and then the other one, I don't remember what date it was. Who is it in front of? Like what judges or panel of judges? Is it by Zoom? Can people attend? Do you want people to attend to support? And I don't even remember. I mean, there's so many cases that you have that I certainly can't track which particular case that is that's this Wednesday, but I'm curious. So that's all my question was.
Speak right here. We didn't catch that.
Oh, I just wanted to know when his hearing, what case he's having heard, who's the judge or bank of judges that's hearing it? Is it federal? Is it by Zoom? Is it something that people can go to in person? Do you even want people to come? Because I know lots of times it's kind of intimidating. But anyway, that was my question.
Well, so first of all, we're not intimidated, but but second of all, the first hearing is next Friday. It's in Providence, Rhode Island. So I don't ask you to come in person, but I anticipate being there for that hearing. That's next Friday, the 18th of April, and that concerns the Institute of Museum Services.
Will it be broadcast or Zoom or anything where people can watch and listen?
Yes, so there is a YouTube. It's in front of Judge McConnell. I mean, I don't have a link with me right now, but so it's if you go to the district, it's a federal court. It's the United States District Court for the District of Rhode Island. It's in front of Judge McConnell. The case is called Rhode Island versus Trump. and it's so that's next Friday. The Friday after that is the case of New York versus McMahon. That's the dismantling of the Department of Education. Motion for both are motions, hearings on motions for preliminary injunction. I don't recall the judge's name off the top of my head right now. It's a District of Massachusetts judge, and I believe that one also will be available on YouTube and is able to be viewed.
This event is being live streamed, so we have friends out there in the ether who are participating with us, which is why we've been so such sticklers for speaking directly into the mic so that they can hear us. So this event will also be recorded and available on the HawaiiJ20.com website if you want to send the link to people who weren't able to be here, or if you want to listen to it again.
Hi there. Thanks for your talks. This has been really helpful. I'm Nicole. I'm part of Harris United Methodist Church. David, you were talking about how your strategy is to collect evidence, build a case. You might have heard, but like MSNBC or something. I heard that the Arizona Attorney General has set up a page on their site for people to report problems they're having with Social Security. And I'm sure there's a lot of other issues that are happening that might be illegal. Is that something that the Hawaii Attorney General's office is thinking about, setting up a webpage to collect this kind of evidence, or should some of our groups start trying to collect that kind of evidence for your office?
So right now what we have is a way of reporting complaints. In general, the lawsuits that we've been handling do involve government agencies. So the primary declarants that we've had in terms of affidavits have been, government officials and things like that. To the extent that people feel that their civil rights are being violated, we accept all complaints. The email address is hawaiiag@hawaii.gov. I'll say that again. It's hawaiiag@hawaii.gov. That's also an email address that you can use for basically asking if you had an inquiry about something or a question about some aspect of something. We can't answer a lot in terms of legal advice. We're legally prohibited from providing legal advice to members of the public. But to the extent that you are seeing things, we are all ears. Just as an example, when it comes to issues regarding immigration, we rely on people like the Legal Clinic and Liza Ryan Gill, who work in these spheres to inform us of what's going on, because otherwise we don't know what's going on. So to the extent that that people are seeing things or observing things that they believe are worth or merit the Attorney General's attention, then again, hawaiiag@hawaii.gov. And we may be working on something more substantive and maybe a little bit more flashy in terms of providing a form or something like that for people to fill things out.
Thank you.
First of all, thank you all for being here. I would love to hear if each of you could think of, if you could ask everyone in this room to do one thing, like to leave here and have their one bullet point action that they're going to take, and I'd love to hear from everyone if they're willing. What would you have everyone here leave here and do?
Ideas and stories matter. Tell them and have good ideas and exchange them with friends.
What kind of stories?
Counter stories to the dominant story. And there are many, we talked about all these things that are happening. Tell a story about Social Security. Tell a story about Medicaid. Tell a story about people losing their jobs, a counter story. That's built on empathy. That's built on compassion. That's not built on social Darwinism.
Okay, if you don't mind if I add to that, I'm an ELA teacher, and so I work closely with the idea of story and mo'olelo, and the idea of mo'olelo as resistance, and the idea that we think of history being so important, but we don't honor that we are creating that as we speak. So as much as you can, share story about any aspect of your existence to anyone that will hear. Write it down, take pictures, tell keiki. That is, I think, one of the most powerful things as humans that we can do is to connect, to communicate. So I really appreciate that call to action.
So I'm legally prohibited from providing political advice of any kind. So what I can say is that from my perspective, it's my belief that the Trump administration is one of their major goals is to disorient and confuse people and to make people afraid. And I think that one of the best ways to combat that is to find news sources that you find to be reliable, but that aren't necessarily partisan or sensationalist. I mean, I prefer the New York Times in terms of the reporting. I think that the New York Times does a very good job of reporting on what's happening in the Capitol. I also feel that they're independent. They don't have owners who are, sort of questionable background. I also believe that reading the BBC website provides excellent news coverage on an international level about sort of how international people are perceiving the events. And so I would just recommend finding those reputable news sources so that you can stay informed and not be subject to propaganda.
That's a hard question. I think for me, it would be to keep learning. It's not just about whatever policy area affects your life directly, but it's about the grand picture of everything, right? Think about how all these pieces move together. And keep in mind that policy change takes time too, right? The momentum that you're building now as a community, as a collective, right? That should keep going regardless of who's in office next. Because again, as has been mentioned before, Trump is a symptom of the problem. This problem has been building for decades and decades, and it's no accident that you get a fascist in power. This is what's been in store all along, right? So, beyond what's immediately in front of us, right, we have to keep thinking about the long term and how to really build something better out of the ruins that Trump is trying to foster over here. So please just keep stay engaged and work together. Okay, so we have a tax fairness coalition where you can find out about all the fascinating tax updates that are happening in the state. Yeah, we have action alerts and stuff. So I was instructed to bring a QR code sheet. So this huge QR code will take you to our mailing list if you want to join it. I mean, please join, because otherwise it'll just be 3 people talking at each other, and it would be great to have, actual conversation going on besides just policy wonks talking about whatever. So please, we would really, really appreciate you guys just coming through. Yeah, HITaxfairness.org. I actually forgot the site myself, but that's a place to go and be involved in some shape or form. So thank you. Thanks.
Did you have a second question?
I was going to ask if you wanted to add.
Oh, if I want to add. Well, this may not be popular, but I really noticed that on the street that Gay and I live on, neighbors who are really lovely and we've spoken with for years have all of a sudden lost their minds and are saying the most insane things that are conspiratorial and hateful and talking about how Biden didn't do anything to help people in North Carolina, like just nonsense stuff. So it's like, we've made it our mission to change their minds. Like, I know it's not easy to talk to people who are spewing. It can be lethal. I know it's not easy to talk to people who are saying really horrible things and are supporting really awful things, but I think it's really crucial. Like, they are a significant part of life here in the United States, and we cannot allow them to continue to have nothing to turn to other than a fascist, right? We have to show them that there is another way. So I don't know how exactly we're going to accomplish that, but I think what I would recommend is that there is no one that I won't talk to. when I need to change their mind. I know, be careful. Oh, I know.
To have a teacher moment, just to kind of summarize everything that was shared. Leaving today, we're going to tell our stories. We're going to subscribe to the New York Times and check BBC. We're going to keep learning about the future, looking at where we've come from and where we're going. And we're going to talk to people as much as it is safe to do so.
So if we could have the two of you who are here to ask questions, and then we'll wrap it up. Okay. Yeah.
Public radio, too, please. Oh, they're so smart. Thank you all, and thank you, Harris, and thank everybody else for being here, because we're in a dark forest, and things are happening, and we have to learn how to be active, engaged citizens again, and I'm number one in line wanting to do that. So, Devin, I really appreciated the way you were trying to bring in the mechanisms of D.O.G.E. With what's destabilizing the flourishing of our own community here in our own state. And you said you might be able to throw out some policies that right now would change the shape of taxation and who pays what and who has power and why they have power and why public officials have so much difficulty in enacting things for the public good. And I think it has something to do with donations and campaigns and the Supreme Court rulings that anything goes. So what can we do? Should we tax Bezos? And I mean, what do we do?
Yeah.
Citizens United.
Yeah.
That's a part of it, definitely.
Yeah.
I have to be careful about what I say here, but
you're advocating a policy.
Yes,
you don't have to.
I think there are just countless things that we can do right now. Let me give you an example of a bill that was recommitted recently, but was going along in the legislature for a while, which is capital gains, raising capital gains, which are investments basically, right? There's a loophole right now that means that people who are obscenely wealthy pay a maximum capital gains rate of 7.25%, which is absurd. Should be way higher than that. Just because you have your money invested in stocks or something doesn't mean that you should pay a lower tax rate than someone who's working a job. I don't think that's a good idea, but that's one of the good, like the most immediate examples I can think of. There's capital gains, there's conveyance tax, which happens when a property is sold.
What about empty homes tax?
Empty homes tax is a good idea too. That's more of like a county level idea, but that's also gaining traction as well. It's all good. Like, I guess there's so many things that I could talk about, and I just want to focus. I mean, for now I'm focusing on a few, but I can like provide resources too if folks are interested. Yeah, go to the website has some ideas. Yeah, but basically, tax super wealthy people, especially those from out of state. Yeah.
Eat the rich, I like it. But
yeah.
why aren't our public officials able to move forward on doing the right thing that they know they should do?
That's what I meant when I said I have to be careful about what I say, because I have a lot of personal thoughts about that publicly as a representative of my organization. I'll say, money is powerful, and wasn't it Upton Sinclair who said that it's hard to get someone to understand something when their salary depends on it? I don't know.
Hello.
I have a related question to you, Devin. Is the ledge is going to stop meeting soon? They have not done what we needed them to do. How do we pressure them to do what they need to do to protect us?
Great question, thanks. And I should have added from the start, really, that there are going to be, from what we've heard, 3 special sessions because the legislature has a lot on their plate, especially with the federal stuff, so they're going to have to come back a few times and talk about it. I think August is going to be the first one, then October, maybe November. Anyway, there's opportunity to resurrect a lot of bills, and there's opportunity to get things going, new things going too. So I would say I mean, I hate to sound trite because everybody says this, but yeah, like email, call your legislators, you know, apply some form of pressure in that way through communication to get them to do the right thing, to at least get your voices heard, right, and let them know what they should be doing, even if they may or may not follow it.
Start with their raises. Just gave themselves a big raise. Oh, wonderful.
So I think we have, did you have a question yet?
Hi, my name's Thomas. Excuse me. I'm not the best of health right now. On the national level, I think massive direct action is going to be necessary this year, very soon. We can't wait till the midterms next year. There's only one group called People Power United. On their website, they claim they're planning up to 200 different acts of civil disobedience. Next week, Saturday, there's another national hands-off protest. But what I'd like to know is anybody among these groups, I've noticed they have a general strike sign on their desk. That's what I'm talking about. Most Americans have no idea what that is. I think even most progressives might have heard of it, but it's been so long since Americans engaged in one, nobody knows what it is, but I think we need to think that way. That's not out of the box anymore, so can you? Yeah, okay. Is there any plans to educate Americans ASAP? Okay, thank you. And is one planned yet? Has a date been picked?
We need 11 million people.
Exactly, okay, well, maybe next Saturday we'll get 10 million instead of 5, so. But that's what that's gonna take. I mean, storytelling is nice, policy is nice, but it's time not to play nice anymore.
I just want to give you guys some resources. The Democrats have done a very bad job of filling the media ecosystem. We thought Rachel Maddow was going to do it. She's terrific, but here are 4 that you might want to look into. Simon Rosenberg, Midas Touch. The Contrarian is Jennifer Rubin, and she's got some great people, and Robert Hubble. Those are just some of, you're starting to see the media space fill up. It's not just the New York Times, they annoy me a lot. And the Washington Post is a disaster. But those are 4 really good ones. I'll see if I can find a list of, there's a list of all this new media that is evolving and filling the space. The Republicans pay their influencers. The Democrats are so far behind, it is really bad. Indivisible's working on some of that. But those 4, those are online resources if you are interested. They're good ones. Simon Rosenberg has something, I can't remember the name of his blog or his publication, Midas Touch. They're just cooking. Jennifer Rubin, she left the Washington Post and she started the Contrarian. Robert Hubble, I like his really a lot. He's very calm, and he's the astronomer. He ends with a beautiful photo at the end. Those are, and of course, public radio is good. So
Media Matters is the group that just did the study on how dominant.
Right, Media Matters is, yes. But these are resources other than the Washington Post and the New York Times that are really, really good.
Can I make a suggestion?
Can you use the microphone, just so it can be recorded for the folks on live stream?
Yes.
Okay, yes.
You have the emails of everybody here. It would be so helpful if you would just list these things. I hear them, but by the time I get home, I won't know them. So I'm going to listen to it.
But that's a great suggestion.
I'm just saying, if you could just list some of the things that have been said that we can do, and where these resources are.
Yes.
I would appreciate that.
That's a great suggestion.
And I think one more media source, it's increasingly important that we also get the perspective of non-American good media. And I really suggest, if you can, look at The Guardian. That's a UK paper. And they, if you can subscribe, it's great. If not, they actually let you read the full article, not just 5 articles, but more than 5 articles. And The Guardian really has an excellent coverage and gives us a look outside of our own bubble, which I think increasingly is important.
And sorry, can I add one more? So my favorite is the Majority Report podcast. It's a really, really good one with a ton of info packed into it. And they aren't, again, I'm going to moderate. They are not part of the establishment, so that's a good thing.
So Bella from General Strike.
Yes. Hello. Yes, I appreciated the question from our friend over here, I guess about a little bit more insight into that. So there is a coalition going on right now to call to action for a general strike. There has been a lot of research behind this idea of 3.5% of the population, or 11 million people. That is what it will take for us to get some momentum, get some action. And so currently we have about 1,500 strike signers for us in Hawaii, but this is a national coalition. Most of our projects right now are web-based, so you can come up and take a look at we have links to resources connected with locally our partners like 5051. We partnered with Indivisible, and really what we're out here trying to do is we want to collect as many people as we can and gather resources such as mutual aid, such as time banking, things that will be sustaining for folks. And we have heard a lot of concern from people too that maybe don't have a means of employment currently or are retired, and there's a space for everyone in this movement. Really, it's just a way to get some activism going so that we can really make a stand and disrupt the capitalism machine as it stands right now.
What is the general strike?
The general strike is, I'm gonna read my paper here. It's working people collectively refusing to work until demands are met. Oh. Yes.
So you have to have resources to.
Yes, so sorry.
This is the population.
Yes, so this is not, we are reaching out, and we have an entire outreach team that's connecting with unions, but what we're really trying to do is make sure that there is going to be support networks for everybody that is going to be participating in the strike.
It's not just a one-day protest. It's
Yes.
like you're in it until you win.
Yeah.
So you're asking people not go to work.
Just, you come up with a system, the French do it well, South Koreans know how to do this.
Yes, the 1960s is a historic time where we did see lots of prolonged strikes. I mean, I think a lot of us too can think back to even like the civil rights era, the Montgomery bus boycotts, things of that nature are the history behind it, where we're leaning into those resources and looking back on like she was saying the 1968 strikes, taking a look at history and seeing the momentum that was able to be made from those movements as well.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, thank you.
Rose, yes? Oh,
What's going on next Saturday?
what's going on next Saturday? I don't know. The 19th. Oh, I'm sorry, I don't have information about that.
Community Day of Action. If you want more information about it, we have lots of information.
Okay. Go over to 5051 table 4 if you're interested in hands-off.
The best way to find out information is to subscribe to indivisiblehawaii.org, hawaiij20.com, follow social media, 50501 High, General Strike High, is that right? Yes. Hawaii or High? Hawaii. But we're all linked to each other. Find us. If you're not subscribed to the J20 yet, there's a list
Please write carefully so I can read your handwriting. I don't have all of your emails. I don't. So make sure that we do, and we will tell you what's happening next Saturday, next Wednesday, next Thursday, next Sunday, as soon as we can figure it out.
Big database would be really awesome.
Yeah.
Make one, baby.
So thank you, thank you, thank you. What we are doing here today is not just listening to one another. We are building the new society that we want to live in, right? This is what we're doing here right now. We are talking to one another. We are refusing to be isolated from one another. We are trying to think of what is the best path forward so that we can protect one another. We are feeding one another. We are listening to one another. So please, join us on May the 9th from 6 to 8 for our next forum, which will be Standing United for Our Rights and Freedoms, when we will be talking about civil rights, constitutional rights, etc. To be announced. We're hoping here at Harris, fingers crossed. I'm looking at you, Karen, back there. So thank you, everyone, for coming out tonight. Thank you to our speakers for their time and their energy and their knowledge. Thank you to all of you for your time and energy and knowledge. And we will see you again, I'm sure. Good night.
Pardon me?